So Mary, what's next?
I think we can go back to Grace's administrative report. Grace, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Okay, Grace, the minutes have been accepted and approved by a unanimous vote of the commission.
We just have one expense to approve, which was Mary's mileage from the month of September. I can briefly show the balance sheet as well.
Excellent. Any questions here? Okay, nice job, Grace.
I would move that we go ahead and pay the expense for Mary.
Okay, a second.
Second,
Okay, let's do a voice vote. Chris, aye.
Tom, I.
Alan, aye.
Sandy, I.
Mike, aye.
David, I.
Marcella, I.
Okay, that's a unanimous vote of the commission to pay our expense.
And then lastly, for the website, with the new website, we currently do not have any images on the conservation webpage. The previous images from the previous website did carry over, but they were pretty poor quality. I know I've been in contact with Mike a little bit, but if any other commission members have any good images that they would like to be reflected on the website, you can just send them to me.
Thank you, Grace. Okay, now what's our next agenda point?
I guess if we want to take care of our visitors, we might want to move to the 40B comment letter for 47 Main Street.
Okay. So we have people that have come with comments. Please tell us your name and your address, please. And we'll go through people as you would like.
Chris, Mary through Chris, maybe you should show us the letter and people can
Okay.
see the letter that we're proposing to send to the ZBA.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mary.
Yeah. So the letter kind of describes the involvement of the Conservation Commission in this process already, which was in a little over a year ago, year and a half ago in April of 2022. The applicant filed an ANRAD, which is basically to review the wetland line. And so at the time the line was reviewed, our former agent did it, and he identified some wetlands off property that were not included on the plans, and those were later included. The applicant was also asked to evaluate a pooled area in the wetland to determine if it was a vernal pool, and they did do that, and it was determined not to be a vernal pool. And so the wetland line was approved in June of 2022, and that wetland line is valid for 3 years. I think at our meeting a few weeks ago, a question was raised about a butter notification, and I did ask the applicant to send us a copy of all their slips. It does appear that they made a mistake. The list had 56 abutters on it, and after checking carefully, it was found that one abutter, the Kennedys, were not notified. So this is a minor issue with that application. I don't think it's enough to invalidate the whole process, though. So that is true that the Kennedys were not notified. Just other comments that, it's not, there's no endangered species here. There's no floodplain here. It's not mapped as a biomap critical habitat. The water, the drain off from the site does go into Centerbrook, which is a cold water fishery resource. So that's important to note. This project will be subject to review under the Wetlands Protection Act. And so the applicant will have to submit a notice of intent. But they will not be subject to the town bylaw. The town bylaw is a lot more strict in terms of what development is allowed. But the Conservation Commission will have an opportunity to review what we're allowed to review under the Wetlands Protection Act. Just a note as how, so the local bylaw requires a 30-foot no disturb zone. And the applicant has honored that pretty much as they could, I would say. If you look at the plans, they show the 30-foot no disturb zone on their plans. The only place they've crossed that is at the access road, where it's very narrow and the wetland is extremely close to the road. So that is the only place they have crossed into that 30-foot no disturb zone. So in terms of that part of our bylaw, they did honor that, and we can appreciate that. The local bylaw also requires a 50-foot no build zone for residential projects, and the applicant has not honored this. They don't have to, as you know, that they have not honored that. If there's a few places where the parking lot goes into the 50-foot no build, and then the stormwater basins, I think all of them are in the 50-foot no build. So if the applicant had honored these buffers, then this project would have had a smaller scope. Just there is a temporary wetland disturbance to put in the sewer service. We'll try to make sure under the Wetlands Protection Act, we will be able to try to make sure that they, take care of that as good as possible. We're recommending that a peer review engineer be hired to ensure compliance with the state stormwater regulations. And they should include the most recent numbers for precipitation in making their calculations. And then the commission is recommending that the zoning board consider things for climate change resilience. So that will basically be looking at stormwater runoff, just making sure that there's no increase in runoff, no flooding problems from this site. So we're going to ask the zoning board to require the applicant to do that. And then another thing, that the trees and shrubs that planted should be tolerant of warmer climates, since we're expecting climate change to bring us a warmer climate. So we want native, non-invasive species as much as possible. So those are the comments that we have submitted, and or we're about to submit, that the commission's going to vote on approving this letter to submit to the zoning board, but we would also take public comment as well, I believe.
Do you have any comments from the commission?
So this is Dick Kennedy from 22 Hazeltine Road.
Okay, this is from the audience.
So, looking at the review you did of the Westboro Road property and the amount of water there, if you were to walk this property at 47 Main Street, a lot of it would be way wetter than what you took pictures of on Westboro Road. And I don't know how, this gets overlooked, as a private resident, and that's private property. We can't go on it. But I can tell you that all my neighbors on Whitney that look at that property in their backyard will tell you how wet it is. And it's wetter than Westboro Road.
Yeah, the wetlands are, under the Wetlands Protection Act and under our local bylaw, people are allowed to build within a certain number of feet of the wetland. And they're not in the wetland. They are not as far back as we would like them to be, but they're not in the wetlands. They're maintaining the 30-foot no disturb, but not a 50-foot no build.
So as a homeowner, if they build that and like Whitney and Hazeltine flood, what do? We just say, oh, well, they were following all the guidelines?
They're
And
going to
is it-
be they're going to be required under the state stormwater law to make sure that there's no increased runoff off their property. That's a state law that they have to provide for. And this is one of our recommendations is, so their engineer is going to come up with all their calculations and say why they're providing for it. And then we're recommending that we hire a peer review engineer for the town to check the calculations and make sure they're actually, that the peer review engineer agrees with what the applicant is proposing.
And then who follows through?
And yeah, and then, so after the fact, when all's said and done, who monitors it?
Yeah, so that part, there's usually an operation and maintenance plan. And we can condition that that they need to be providing reports to the commission every year. That's pretty standard, that these stormwater basins need to be checked to make sure they're not accumulating sediment, that all the traps are being cleaned out, because that's the type of thing that would end up causing flooding in the end, is if these things were not maintained. So that's something we can put in the order of conditions.
I think when they put that road in, the access road, which will it'll act like a dam, that the water will back up and flood onto Whitney. That's, it's already really wet back there. It won't take much. And that road will probably dam it up and force it over the properties on Whitney.
Mary, in the order of conditions, we'd have the roadway and the infrastructure going in first before any of the other development.
Yeah, that's typically what would happen. Yeah.
Okay, so if that did happen with the road, we would know that before any of the house lots are opened up. So that could stall the project until that got resolved.
Yeah, as part of I know they have I'm pretty sure they have a stormwater basin on that side of the road, or at least there's something connecting. I know they have a basin nearby there to collect that drainage. But yeah, we'll have to, that's certainly a question to bring up for their engineer when they do their hearing next week. That's a good question to ask them because they have to take care of all that runoff. They're required to do that.
Mary, maybe we could add a sentence to the letter saying that, we want a detailed sequencing plan.
Sure.
That would protect the butters from potential flooding impacts, something like that.
Yeah. And I'm sure
We'll require one in the notice of intent anyway, but
yeah.
But it wouldn't hurt to put that in the letter too.
Yeah.
I'm sure the residents who are here tonight will also be at the other meetings, so that would be a great thing to bring up when you have the other people in the audience, so they hear that loud and clear.
So this is Mary Ellen Kennedy, 22 Hazeltine Road as well. And Grace, you were at the planning board meeting last night. You might be able to remember the gentleman's name, but last night we were bringing up the same concerns to the planning board, and one of the gentlemen on the planning board committee, he was on the screen, he wasn't in person, mentioned that where the Grange is, there's a flood zone over there. And that property abuts this property, 47 Main Street. And there is a parcel of land that is a concern to the town because it is a flood zone. Grace, do you remember that conversation last night? Do you remember who was speaking? It was a gentleman on the camera.
Yes, I believe it was Tom Davidson.
Thank you. Yeah. And that's what he said, correct?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So that adds to our concerns as well. And there's got to be more wetlands than what they're saying is there if that's a flood zone.
Where was the flood zone that they were talking about?
I believe he said it was between the Grange and this property.
All right, yes.
47th Street.
Yeah, so that's wetland for sure in there. I'm not sure that it's technically a FEMA flood zone.
Yeah, just to clarify, Mary's on something. FEMA flood zones and land subject to flooding under the Wetlands Protection Act are often very different entities.
Yeah, I can share my screen to show where the FEMA zones are, but yeah, certainly it may be subject to flooding back there. The FEMA zones have different protection, and and you would need, if you lived in one of these zones, you would need flood insurance or something. This is what the FEMA zone is for. So the FEMA zone runs along Center Brook. And here's the subject property. Here's the wetland area. The Grange is what? Is this the Grange? Yeah, maybe that's the Grange. So this is the large wetland, which does, I think, eventually empty in to Center Brook this way.
Do we have other comments from the audience? So Mary, are those comments reflected in the letter there you provided?
Yeah, Mike had suggested we add a sentence about providing a detailed sequencing plan to, to protect neighbors' interests, make sure there's no flooding. And we can do that for our letter, and that can certainly be part of any notice of intent review process. We want to make sure that they comply with the state stormwater regs, and they use the strictest precipitation numbers to make sure that, because obviously everyone knows there's like a ton more rain this summer than there has been before. So we would want to make sure that they're complying with that. Absolutely.
Thank you. Do you have other questions or comments from the audience? Okay, from the commission, does anyone have a question or comment about Mary's letter? Hearing none, we have a motion to accept the letter and issue it. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, let's do a voice vote. Chris, aye.
Tom, aye.
Alan, aye.
Sandy, I.
David, I.
Mike, aye.
Marcella, I.
Okay, that's a unanimous vote of the commission. thank you, Mary, for drafting that. And for all of the people who are here, when we do start having individual house lots and things come in, we'll have other notice of intent hearings they'll be able to attend as well. So-
Grace, I have a question for you. Are you the admin assistant for the zoning board of appeals as well?
No, that is Amy Bonina.
Okay, could you perhaps ask her just to make sure that our letter is added to the package of information?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
I know Mike Mountanellis is anxiously awaiting it. He was asking me for it today, so.
Great. Mary, anything else right now?
I think we can go back to the agenda items.
I could make a suggestion. We have a couple of representatives from SVT on the line now. Perhaps we could go to the Mechanic Street CR next. Hello, Laura.
Let me unmute. Hello, this is Laura Matei,
Hi there.
Director of Conservation with SVT. Hello, everyone.
Excellent.
Hi.
Okay, so for the CR, is that what we're looking at? Do you have that, Mary?
Yeah, Mike, I'll show your most up-to-date version.
And I'd like to introduce Tony Schiavelli, who's also here with me. He's our new land protection specialist.
Thank
Good
you.
evening,
Well,
everyone. Thank you.
Can you guys see this, or should I
Yeah.
get a better
Okay.
copy?
we can see that.
It's small, but visible. I don't know if you can make it larger.
I'll try. I need to download it and then maybe I can zoom it in. Let's see if this helps though. Does this help?
No,
No?
not yet.
Okay.
You can make it larger. Each individual participant can make it larger on their own screen.
And I have to apologize to everyone for my technological problem today. I don't know what it was.
These things happen to all of us and they
It always
drive us crazy.
I feel bad because they always happen to me. And partway through trying to figure it out, my computer decided to install the updated programs. So that's why it took so long.
Yeah, and this is taking a long time because my Word is very slow.
Well, while that's happening, Mike, do you, are there like, what I would like to know before we maybe go through it page by page is if there were kind of general themes or comments that you had, or additions or subtractions. You're not
Yeah,
muted.
yes. Thanks, Laura. I think, Marcella may have other things, but at our last meeting, we discussed the CR to some extent. And there were two issues that kind of came up that we felt needed discussion. There may be more after further review, but those two were, what are we gonna do about e-bike use? And the other was whether or not to allow foraging, for ferns, mushrooms, nuts, things like that. The CR is kind of silent on both those
Right.
issues, and we were kind of wondering what SVT thinks about those two issues. So those to start off with, anyway, those are two things that we could talk about.
Before
Whatever.
before I respond to that one, was there, just because I kind of want to get a general scope of our conversation tonight, were there anything that raised significant concerns that you want to make sure we address tonight? Other than the foraging and the e-bikes?
I don't think there were. I mean, we did make some edits to the
Mhm.
to the purposes section that you may or may not have noticed.
I actually, when I was looking at your copy that you sent me, I actually didn't see any edits from you except for maybe one. And I was a little confused by that as to why I didn't see other edits.
hmm,
But if you were, yeah, Mary, if you could scroll down, we can.
yeah, let's make sure we're looking at the right thing. I know there was a you shouldn't
this
see
is-
anything for
Is
floodplain
this
on
the
here.
clean copy?
Yes.
So we can't see any of the edits in the clean copy.
That's right. We
Mary, do you have the
I have the other one, yeah.
I actually have the other one that you sent to me, Mike, if you wanted me to share my screen.
sure.
Okay, let me do that. Let's see if I can do this correctly. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Just have to move people to the other side so I can see it. I noticed John Joya's name here, so I guess this was started a long time ago. So I'm just scrolling through the purposes.
Yeah, Laura, could you
Yes.
show the markup? It seems like all I'm seeing are the
Okay, so this may be my Chris was talking about technology challenges, and I may have them as well, because I don't know why I couldn't see your comments,
Yeah,
and I'm trying to figure out how
well,
to.
if you click on review, click on the
Well, you know
review.
what's happening is the Zoom toolbar is in my way, and I can't seem to move it.
Mhm.
All right, hold on. I'm stopping sharing because that was the only way I could get to that. All right, so if I click on review and then I go to show markup.
Yeah, or maybe show all markup, something like that. If there's an all markup option.
It's simple markup or all markup.
Yeah.
I got it.
Try that one.
I got it.
Get ready for a lot of red lines, folks.
I know, because I did see that when I first looked at it, and then I was like, wait a second, something's wrong. I was reviewing it earlier today. I was like, I don't understand why I'm not seeing their comments. Okay, here we go. There we go.
Oh,
Yeah, it's going to be very colorful now.
oh yeah. This looks like something Mike would do.
Whoa. All right, so. Forgive me, Mike, would you like to go, shall we go through the purposes?
Yeah, let's go to the purposes. I
Okay.
can at least there are a few changes I made there.
Yep.
So let me scroll down.
So the clean copy, which is the one that I had been working from, all the stuff that's scratched on this copy is not in the clean copy, I take it, correct? Everything that's crossed out here?
That should be true.
Okay, I just want to make sure I was reading that I wasn't missing anything. So that's good.
So most of these comments, the purposes were kind of like based on some local knowledge. You know, I made some edits to this, Stefan's Farm. I call it Stefan Farm's open space. Just made a few edits here. I don't think it changed the,
One of the things that I may not understand how the markup works, but the red underlined section, is that what Kristen had put in there in her draft? So
I
under
think,
open.
I think so.
Yeah, okay.
And then I modified it slightly,
Mm-hmm.
which is probably the, like the blue cross out.
Okay.
And text added is in blue.
Okay. And so, for example, you said delete floodplain mapping in the southeastern corner of the premises is not correct. Okay,
Right, yeah.
great.
There's definitely an issue with the floodplain there. It shows a
Okay.
stream,
Yep.
you know, originating from Warren Brook going through the property, and that's
Mhm.
not what happens. So,
Under soils, that was an edit that was already in there. Okay. So wildlife habitat you left as Kristen had marked
yeah,
it.
and I added the eastern box turtle sentence.
Correct. And was that observation sent to Heritage?
The one at Steffens was, yes, they have that. And then there was another one long ago on the power line. But I'm not, I can't say for certain if it was on Mechanic Street property or, some other nearby parcel on the power line. So, but certainly, it's early accessional habitat, it's box turtles. There's a lot of other observations for box turtles, not too far away from this property.
Yeah, okay.
Road crossings, things like that.
Under public access,
added hunting and did some editing, of the text and deleted chapter 61.
Right, okay.
Mike, that only allows non-motorized vehicles under that section, right?
I believe, yeah, well, go back a bit. Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
other non-motorized, yeah, correct.
And this is where the question about the e-bikes begins to raise its
Yeah, I had a question about that. Do you guys usually allow mountain biking on your properties?
Yes.
Or have you? Yes, okay.
But I'm, considering seeing if we could introduce something like a speed limit so that it would allow for not just e-bikes, but also for vehicles that would allow somebody who doesn't have the physical, if it's somebody who's got physical limitations, which we haven't really addressed very well. So, but I think a speed limit would address this, but we have to talk about the possibility of other motorized vehicles as well. Personally, I regard an e-bike as a motorized vehicle, but not everybody has that feeling about it.
Right.
But I think whatever policy we have, it should be consistent throughout the town properties, both, the foraging issue as well. It's a lot easier to enforce if we can be consistent throughout the town with our policies.
Yeah. Okay, so, and I think, yeah, there's a couple of ways to handle that. So the CR does not necessarily have to restrict some of that because you can actually, if we're also involved in access here together, could set regulations. And it's good to
Does
have that flex.
SVT have, other policies regarding e-bikes on different properties or different towns, or have you
At
had a
this
problem
point,
with
at this
bikers?
point, Marcella, at this point, it has not come up for us at all yet.
Okay,
Um,
it has for us,
Yeah.
so,
yeah.
we
So this
do
is
need
good
to
to
address
know.
it.
Yeah, I think, knowing that you've started to see this happening, we should think about this. So, yeah.
Okay. About mountain biking, what is the SVT policy regarding mountain bikers?
It's not allowed on most of our properties, but there are some properties where it is allowed. So it's not the same at all properties.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, we don't allow it where there's a lot of wetlands or very steep topography. That's the way we have worked on that. Or also if it's just a smaller property where it doesn't make sense anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Laura, I don't know whether it's relevant to mention what we talked about earlier, that CFR. Someone mentioned speed limits and all that. I don't know whether whether it's useful, but there is Laura and I talked about this earlier. There is a CFR that was issued with respect to U.S. Wildlife refuges concerning e-bikes. And it just basically leaves it up to each individual manager of a refuge site to decide whether it's compatible with the roads or the trails, but they do lay out some very basic regulations, basically saying it has to be pedal assisted. And then they say the motor can't exceed 1 horsepower, and they've got some speed limits for the various class of bikes. I just throw that out there. I don't know whether that's helpful at all, but if you're going to consider speed limits and other things like that, it may be useful or relevant to look at that CFR.
Yeah.
Yeah, is there a link you could send me that I could take a look at that?
You know what? I can just send you a PDF of the CFR if you'd like.
Sure, that sounds great. Yeah, you could just send it to the whatever email.
Yeah, I have.
I'll make sure
Okay.
Tony has the
Yeah.
emails.
I
Thank
have
you.
Mike's email, so I can send it to him.
Perfect.
Okay, so, but generally speaking, this is a good purpose here on public access. Biodiversity, I don't think, Mike, you made any changes there. Habitat connectivity, water quality, a couple of little edits there. It supports a community groundwater well 1 mile downstream. The certified vernal pool and wetlands.
There's
Yes.
there may be a second vernal pool that
Okay.
that I came across last week.
Okay.
So we did take a GPS point on it. So
Okay.
I'll add that to our inventory,
Great.
but we can't confirm that till the spring. We don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For the indigenous cultural landscape.
Yeah, I have an update on that.
Mhm.
Bettina Washington from NIFO has agreed to come take a look and see if there are some features on this property.
Mhm.
She seemed what we've reported to her, or the person that went out there to take a look at the site with. She saw things that seemed of interest, and she reported that back to Bettina, and Bettina sounded very interested. So that can't happen till November or early December. but
Mhm.
that is in the works. So
Okay,
we'll get
great.
an inventory of um, some indigenous, if there's anything of an indigenous significance, um, and get back to you on that. But there
Yeah,
seems to be
so
quite a bit there.
yeah, so for the purposes of the CR, the language, as you see right now, it says it's known to be near the border of two Nipmuc villages, the nearby, et cetera, et cetera. Do you foresee that? I guess my question is timing and content. Do you foresee that you want to wait for them to do that before we finalize the CR?
Well, I think it might be sufficient to state that um, there have been features that have been identified, and then
Mhm.
when it comes to doing the baseline report, we can do an inventory of them then.
Mhm. Okay.
But I think it's clear that there's something there that would be of
Yeah.
interest.
Yeah. So do you think this language is good for the purposes then?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And
Mhm.
the person I was talking to said that Hassanamisco and Hassanamesset were essentially the same. She was confused by the two different terms.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I don't know, were there actually two Nipmuc villages with different names? I guess my history here isn't great. So I just want to make sure that we have that information stated correctly.
Okay.
So
So I wouldn't know the answer to that.
yeah, I can follow up and see if she can enlighten me a little bit.
Okay.
But yeah, that was just her comment when I sent her
Mhm.
the language, and
Mhm.
you know, I wasn't sure what the story was
Yeah.
there.
Right. Okay. I see a spelling error here too, but we'll get to that later. Um, so working forest land, available for forestry that is consistent with the conservation values. Climate change resiliency. This, I'm assuming, the language came primarily from the state model. Mike, do you know, or anyone else know for this particular one?
Yeah, I don't think I made any edits to this section. I did have one thought that that bullet looks a little bit out of place. Maybe just, we could, save the note about iCares, but get rid of the bullet, perhaps.
Save the note about which,
Well, near the bottom of that section, there's a bullet
yeah,
point. Maybe
right,
just get rid of that bullet.
right.
Not the text, just the formatting.
It says, also see the UMass Amherst iCares model.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that.
I'm not sure that, I think that statement might be deleted. I think it was maybe someone just saying there might be another source of information. I don't know where that came from. It looks like,
It's in the model. I think it's just a note there to inform people that there's another source to look at, Laura.
oh, thanks, Tony. So, but probably we should delete that, because we've already looked at a source that works for us. Just gonna make a little note here. consistency with various conservation policies.
Sorry, I was muted. I made a couple edits and
Yeah,
I just suggest deleting Warren Brook because this is adjacent to Stephens, but Warren Brook is, you know, further to the north. So I just
okay,
thought we can't really
It-
expand the conservation area, you know.
right.
Yeah, so
So it says, the open space plan listed the premises as a priority for conservation. Protection of the premises is consistent with the following action items, which are to develop a townwide loop trail, designate Stephens Farm property as conservation area, and protect adjacent properties. Okay, and then protect the Warren Brook corridor along Mechanic Street. Okay. Is that right?
yes, you know,
Okay.
probably at a minimum, there might be worth looking at the OSRP and see if there's anything else that we could add, but I think everything there is correct right now.
Okay,
Oh yeah,
so,
I deleted the heritage landscaping.
Okay.
Somehow Upton missed the boat on that back in
mhm,
2006, whatever, and
mhm,
we don't have an inventory.
okay.
No.
Historic and archaeological resources.
I would just add something about the features identified as significant to indigenous culture.
Right. Um, Conservation appropriate. Okay, so including features identified. I'm sorry, Marcella, what was that?
Let's see, I typed it in. Features identified as significant to indigenous cultures.
Okay. Oops. Okay. Water supply. We have a little bit of a zone 2. So that's it on the purposes, correct?
Could we just go back to the working forest land?
Yes,
Um,
ma'am.
Are we,
So,
I guess, are we talking about as permanently available for forestry? Is that to mean harvesting or other types of forest management? And the idea is it it says that it's permanently available for forestry, but the means of managing forests have changed and might change. How is it assumed that as they change, that is what the
yeah.
common what the approach will be, or do we need to lock in what our vision is?
So I think with the working forest land and the purposes, you don't want to get too specific.
Okay.
So I think, here, it's saying working forest land consistent with these conservation values. And then when you go to reserve rights, we can talk more about perhaps some of the issues that you were thinking about.
Okay.
Prohibited acts and uses, I'm gonna scroll through. Except we get adverse impacts to stone walls. It says disrupting, removing, or destroying stone walls. And then I guess, Mike, you added this interior or boundary walls,
Yes.
foundation
yeah.
stone wells.
Yeah.
Okay. And then under permitted acts and uses, you might want to ignore my comment about the baseline report. Basically, I just have a concern when the CR references maintaining. So I guess, okay, let me back up. I think the model was saying to maintain the condition of the premises as documented in the baseline report. And my concern there is that it's asking the property to stay static, which I think is unrealistic and inappropriate. So I was making the suggestion of to maintain or improve the conservation values as documented in the baseline report. Does that make sense to you?
Could you explain that again?
Yes,
Sorry.
I will. So it originally says that you're allowed to do different kinds of vegetation management in order to maintain the condition of the premises as documented in the baseline report. So if you're only allowed to do vegetation management to maintain the condition as documented in the baseline report, that means you can't do anything different. So, does that make sense to you?
Like rerouting trails, doing forestry.
No, this is, so the vegetation management really isn't referring to trail things as much. Because it's saying, what it's saying is it wants you to maintain the conditions in the baseline report. And my point is that would be saying you wanted the land to remain static rather than dynamic. So I was suggesting and maintain or improve the conservation values documented in the baseline report. We could come back to that one.
Yeah, that's a lot to chew on, actually. It's, nothing is static, but I think the intent is to not compromise the condition of the land.
Correct. Correct.
I
Yes,
understand what you're, I'm sorry, I understand what you're saying, Laura, and I actually
Yeah.
agree with your point.
what I'm thinking too is our process could be that we go through this tonight. And since I'm taking notes on this copy, I can there's not too many notes yet, but I can kind of send it back for another round, maybe on the clean version. Does that make sense?
That would be great, yeah.
Okay. Where am I here? So non-native nuisance or invasive species, no edits there. Composting, we put in some provisions to protect conservation values and such that there wouldn't be any piling within 100 feet from any wetlands or other resource areas. I think that was a good qualification also with the nesting species, which could include turtles. Natural habitat and ecosystem improvement. I do not have further comments on that one. Do you? Indigenous cultural practices.
That's a little, yeah, it feels like they need to be granted permission,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't think they need or should need.
Mm.
Notification is nice to have,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not sure I'm comfortable with having it be interpreted as permission, having to
Right.
request permission to.
Yeah. So we
engage.
did strike approval.
Yeah.
So but right now it does say notice. I understand what you're saying, and I'm just sort of thinking in my
It's
head.
kind of a sensitive
It
area.
is. Yeah. Yeah. I think it has more to do with what am I trying to say? I'm working on another site in Littleton, actually, now that we're talking about this, where we had a meeting with some Nipmuc people, and I also spoke to some other professionals who were saying that if you wanted to have an allowance for local tribes to access the area, it's actually better to have a cultural respect cultural respect agreement prior to putting a CR on the land.
Is there a prototype for that?
So there is a prototype for that. I don't have it handy, but I've seen one of them.
But there is precedent.
There is precedent. Now, have you spoken to any of the local tribes about using this land?
No.
Fortunately, the Nipmucs had an event at their property on Monday that many of us were invited to, but I wasn't able to attend. Do you have contacts with the local Nipmuc? Any of the?
I personally don't know.
Okay, so who's the woman who you're in touch with about doing the inventory?
She is a former member of the Land Stewardship Committee, Kathy Taylor, and she's been mapping a lot of the features throughout Upton. She's not Nipmuc, but she is in contact with Bettina Washington, and she, sort of opened the doors for us to invite Bettina to come take a look. Bettina, I don't think is Nipmuc either. No, she's not Nipmuc. I know that it would probably go a long way to have a conversation with somebody who does represent the Nipmuc, but I don't know. I personally don't know who those folks might be. And I'm not sure.
I can't remember her name, but we did it. Remember a couple of years ago, or a year or so, we were talking about Peppercorn Hill, and potentially naming one of the
Yeah,
one of the
wasn't
parcels. And I can find her email. Maybe Laura knows it too. But I can find the tribal chief's email address, name. I just can't remember what her name is right now.
okay.
Oh, I don't know that. I do now have, thanks to the meeting that we had on last Wednesday, I actually do have some. So, let me write myself a note. What's this site from their Grafton property? Do you know?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Do you know how far this site is from the Nipmuc's property in Grafton?
Oh, the Hassanemet Woods?
Yeah.
It's a stone's throw, really. It's like you can see it if you go up over the
Oh,
rise
okay.
on the power lines, you can practically see
Oh.
it from there.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. Yeah, so why
It's-
don't I try to reach out to Mike? You're gonna try to find the name of that other person.
Yeah, I'll email it to you and Marcella.
Okay.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, it would be really nice to make those connections and see if they have an interest in this land in some way.
And I haven't made contact with him since, but I did have a very brief, like, hey, by the way, I'm in Upton, and he was, he's Nipmuc, and he was talking about, preservation. He was very excited to know about some connections in Upton. And then, we hadn't really gotten in touch since then, and it was a very brief conversation. But if I can reach him, I will try to do so, because he seems to be, I'm not remembering, Andre, I can't remember.
Oh, Andre Strong Bearheart.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so he is a very active in Massachusetts promoting Nipmuc peoples and rights and such. And he was at the meeting I was at. I was actually sitting next to him on Wednesday. So yeah, he's very active and vocal.
Yeah, he was very interested in what was going on in Upton, and
Okay.
If we could reach out to him as well, he might have some,
Yeah, he definitely would. So, and I want to make sure we stay coordinated in our communications. So Mike will send us his contact info, and then I can try to coordinate how we're communicating, so it's not too confusing. Like, who are we communicating with? Mike, the woman you're talking about, what's her affiliation?
She is I'm not sure if chief is the right term, but she's the head of the Nipmuc nation as it exists, I believe. At least she was a year or so ago.
Okay. Yeah, why don't you send me that, and then I'll try to see if I can kind of put her name together with the other contacts I have, just to see maybe she was someone who I also met at that meeting. I don't know. So I will try to get that ball rolling with you. But if Mike sends me that info, I will then take the next step. So then on 6, tribal Native American cultural investigations. I think that's fairly standard, straightforward. Same with the following, which is archaeological investigations. And then trails, I see we've added, or Mike maybe has added, I don't know who added, wetland mitigation areas, construction of wetland. Oh yeah, Mike, that was related to the permits, right?
Yeah, I did add that.
Yeah, okay. So signage. Stone walls and wells. Are there wells on the property?
I was just gonna say Marcella and Bill did find a stone well.
They
And,
did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And based on, you know, some experience we've had with Upland State Forest, I thought it'd be probably a good idea to add capping
Yeah.
potential.
So, oops, my battery's running low. I better go get my cord. Why don't you guys talk about the motorized vehicle section while I plug in my computer?
Mike, that references a section, if you look at that, it indicates that the right to use motor vehicles, et cetera, described in paragraph 3B, but not for the activities in paragraph 3B11. And I think Laura had made a notation that that might not be the right site. Maybe that should be 3B12. Is that what they're trying to reference, the recreational activities?
That's not my text.
Okay.
That might have been Kristen. So 3B12, yeah, I think you're right. There we go. Fixed. But here's where one might talk about e-bikes, I guess. But again, see, the thing about e-bikes is I don't think you need to include it in the CR. I think that can just be, you know, property site regulations that we can adjust as needed.
I agree with that to some extent, but since we're calling out non-motorized activities or equipment, vehicles, how is an e-bike like classified? You know, is it motorized?
So even if it is, if it is motorized, what this is saying is the right to use motorized vehicles and equipment necessary for conducting the activities described in paragraph 3B.
Yeah, so they're saying if you have to fix walls or fix a well, you can use a truck to, I assume, to access it and do what you have to do. But then they're trying to clarify that, but you can't use a motorized vehicle for the recreational purposes in the next paragraph, I think.
Correct. Tony is a lawyer, by the way, so he's good at this language thing.
I don't know about that, but.
Yes, that is the case. And I do think that I tend to prefer not putting excruciating specifics in a CR if it's not necessary. And using, especially in this particular case, using, you know, just your policies and regulations for a property.
Could we say, just throwing something out, you know, someplace say something like, for the purposes of this CR, e-bikes are not considered to be motorized vehicles. And then we can always regulate them. I actually don't have a great love for e-bikes on trails, but
I don't know why, I'm not sure I understand why you want to add that. Like what,
Well, I guess what I'm thinking is at some point the commission, wants to allow e-bikes.
uh-huh,
But if the CR says you can't use motorized vehicles.
for recreation, you're saying, I see.
Yeah, it's for recreation. And so then there'd be a conflict between what the CR said and what, the grantee was enforcing versus what the commission wanted to allow in terms of regulations. So
Well, we
I
should,
don't know what the best thing to do here is, but I think,
Okay.
like I said, I'm not a big fan of travel e-bikes, but on the other hand, I don't want to completely exclude them at this point from the
could we make a distinction between recreational use of motorized vehicles and utilitarian uses, so that we could allow for vehicles to bring materials in and do construction, but not for recreation?
So
Well, that is what.
that is
this-
what it says now, pretty much.
Okay,
That is what paragraph 11 says right now.
okay.
And
I mean,
Mike's,
an e-bike does have a motor. I mean, I know some people claim it doesn't, but it has a motor.
Yeah. I mean, it's turning out to be a gray area, but yeah, I do regard them as motorized vehicles, so that's, I don't know how if we start getting into defining different vehicles in different ways, it'll get pretty confusing.
Can I ask, is there a consensus in town at all, Mike and everyone else, about allowing e-bikes on these types of properties, or is that just still being discussed and no one's really reached a consensus on it yet?
It's still being discussed, at least with the Land Stewardship Committee, and it's like I was saying, the speed limit thing makes more sense to me than defining what type of vehicle it is that's speeding along.
Mhm.
If an e-bike is going 2 miles an hour, cool. Um,
Do
even if an
people ever know their speed?
Yeah, they can go a lot of them easily do 20 miles an hour. Some
Yeah.
go up to 28 miles an hour. So
but
they're pretty fast. I mean, I've come across them on trails, and everyone has, I don't really have opinion about them either way. It's just that they can move.
But a mountain biker can do so as well. Somebody with
Yeah.
power going downhill and can easily get to 20 miles an hour as well.
Mhm.
And it's a matter of safety, and it's a matter of damage to the trails. And then, well, the e-bikes, the noise factor isn't an issue there, but with other motorized vehicles, it is.
Mhm. Right.
I think with defining things that specifically in the future, we can't predict what other motorized things will be available. Now we might have e-bikes. Later on in the future, there might be something else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, 5 years ago, nobody was talking about e-bikes, so you just never know what'll surface as an issue.
So let's see. Mike was saying potentially to add a sentence that says, for the purposes of the CR, e-bikes are not considered motorized. Another potential way to go is to, and I am kind of thinking out loud here, it says the right to use motorized vehicles and equipment necessary for conducting the activities described in this paragraph 3B, period. maybe it should not say, but not for the activities described, because we've already talked about prohibitions of motorized vehicles in the prohibitions.
Yeah, that would have, again, if you do that, that would have the effect of saying that you could use motorized vehicles for recreational purposes. The only other thing I would say is, and I don't have the language off the top of my head, Laura, but is it possible to put something in the CR that says nothing herein restricts somebody, I don't know, the Board of Selectmen or somebody, from permitting use of e-bikes or similar vehicles in the future upon a vote of the board? Is there some way to put language in CR to allow some board to trigger that use or not? I don't.
So that is not something I ever recall seeing
Okay.
in a CR.
Is that that just sort of feels like opening
Well,
things up in a way.
Here's a suggestion. Tony, this is an assignment for you.
Yes, boss. I'm listening.
We're going to show you how to use the sign up for the Mass Land Listserv. I think this is a really great question for the Mass Land Listserv. Like, we're struggling with this issue. What are people doing?
Yeah.
Excellent idea.
Yeah, let's do that, because I think we'll get some good feedback from people. And it helps us to be consistent, as we find with when we're drafting these CRs and working on these CRs across the state. It definitely always helps us to be able to share these ideas and be as consistent as possible with each other. So we're going to do that.
Sounds
give
great.
Tony something. I have to give Tony work to do. We just started.
That'll be done.
I can help with that. Happy to provide you with things to do.
I can only have one boss, right now. So, but maybe as I get up to speed.
All right. So we're gonna put that one aside. We're gonna ask that we're gonna do the survey says.
Well, before we go on here,
Yeah.
This might be the place that we would want to talk about foraging too.
Mm-hmm.
That was
Well,
another. That was another one that the commission
Right.
talked about at our last meeting, and there was no
Do you
real
think-
resolution to it.
We
So
do allow it though. Didn't we vote on this some years ago that we allow foraging as long as it's for personal use?
Yeah, it's in our regs, but the question is, should it be basically as a passive activity in the CR? That's the question. Well, does SVT have any experience with that question?
Put it in a CR for sure. On our properties, we haven't put it in a written. I'm trying to think. I don't think we put it in a written regulation, but when people ask us, we say something along the lines of, what do we say? I have to look it up and get back to you actually, because I don't remember. But I know we haven't totally said you can't do it, because we've had walk leaders who do foraging. That's what it is. And when they do those walks, we ask them to make sure people understand that it doesn't mean they can come and harvest like everything they see, that they need to do it, respectfully and not take, more than would. They need to make sure they're allowing the population of a certain plant to sustain itself.
Yeah, I think that's the key issue, and also that people aren't harvesting or foraging for commercial use. It's
Correct.
strictly for personal use. I mean, you
Yeah.
can, that would help limit the impact to the environment. But I don't know how to really educate people to how to forage without, destroying a particular, species of mushroom, for example. You want to, when you're foraging, anyone who is familiar with foraging knows to leave something behind for next year or for the animals or whatever. But not everybody's aware of that. I don't know if we need to make it explicit, where that if we do allow foraging, that it's under certain conditions and,
I wouldn't do that in the CR. I would just do that in the regulations for the property.
Okay.
That's my very strong recommendation.
We allow hunting, and I don't see a huge difference between harvesting animals and harvesting plants or fungi.
Good point.
So,
Except hunting is regulated by the state. So the manner in which it's done and how much you can harvest is regulated. So actually, I guess that does make it pretty different.
So it would be consistent, if we were to, put it in our regs and regulate it and have people do. I mean, you don't need permits to do it or anything, but foraging, I don't think we should make it that complicated, but.
No, correct. Yeah. Do you feel like you notice people doing a lot of harvesting or foraging that you have a concern at this point in time?
No. I mean, I do. And, I have been on foraging walks and, I know there are people who are learning about doing it, but I've never really, maybe once or twice encountered people who were out actively foraging and said something about it.
Yeah.
I can relate one thing. This just recently came before Metacomet. It's kind of a long story, but there was an event held basically on a property adjacent to a Metacomet preserve. It was one of these mushroom foraging events or mushroom events led, I think, by the Boston Mycological Society.
Yes.
And one of the Metacomet members, board members, was participating, and he said that there were like many pounds of mushrooms were brought back, to the central location, and he was actually concerned that it was really too heavy of an impact, especially since Metacomet's regulations actually say no foraging. But they were doing this on Metacomet property, and then there's actually an ecological thought that there are some insects that actually forage on mushrooms. It's not like harvesting a mushroom is going to kill the plant, but it does remove the ability for other invertebrate, probably even vertebrate wildlife to use the resource. So there's we ran into that just recently, and
well, that's interesting that the Mycological Society, I've been on walks with them, and that's sort of how they sort of send everybody off into the woods and come back with whatever looks interesting and
that's
put it out on the table.
Yeah,
and
everything is fair game.
Yeah, and I wonder if they should be called to task on that, because that does not seem very sustainable.
But isn't harvesting a mushroom like picking an apple off an apple tree? Isn't it the same thing?
Yeah, basically, yeah, you're not killing the organism.
Exactly.
But again, it's like, so if you pick the apple, then the apple's not going to fall to the ground, and some deer isn't going to come along, or a bear is going to come along and eat it. It's, that would be the analogy. But there are some insects and vertebrates that specialize in utilizing mushrooms and other, above ground fungal.
And there are some rare, I mean, there's some mushrooms that are you know, apples aren't rare. Some mushrooms are. And if somebody's just wandering through the woods, picking whatever looks interesting, they may end up taking something that may not be able to replenish itself. So that would be my concern. That's
Yeah, yeah.
that's my limited knowledge of what
Right.
mushrooms and apples are about, but yeah.
Mushrooms. Tony, you're getting into such interesting conversations here.
I do a little mushroom foraging myself, but just around trees. And, my limited understanding is most trees where the mushrooms are growing are trees that are dying. I mean, it may take them 10, 15 years to die, but that's typically where you see them. And they do tend to come back the next year.
And there's a lot of mushrooms that grow out of the ground too, but
Yeah,
I
I don't
think
touch those.
yeah, for the purposes of the CR, we're staying silent on foraging. And we're gonna leave it to our regulations to address that issue.
Okay.
I would like to move on to forest management. And I'm just scrolling through that section to see if there were any comments. I didn't understand this let's see, requirements of a forest stewardship plan. It says, so that's B, and then number 3 says, address how the forest stewardship plan complies with this paragraph 2B10. Does anybody know anything about that? It didn't make sense to me. It was almost like it was a typo. Because what these items are trying to address the requirement of a forest stewardship plan. So be prepared by a licensed forester, include provisions for complying with recommended activities and guidelines. Then it says address how the forest stewardship plan complies with 2B10. Let me go up to see if I can find 2B10. Stone walls?
Well, that's 3. No, that's actually 3B10.
Okay, what's 2B10?
There is no, section 2 purposes isn't numbered by paragraph. So I wonder if this paragraph.
I kind of want to delete this statement because it doesn't seem to be useful.
It's basically saying address how the forest stewardship plan complies with the forest stewardship plan in some sense, almost.
No.
I see your point, but
Yeah. Can I delete this sentence? Is this acceptable? Any concerns about my deleting the 3 I's?
Not here.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Here we go. Done.
Doesn't that feel good?
I know. I feel like I'm so powerful with the editing button here.
Laura, this and the next one references paragraph 2B as well. I wonder if we'll have to.
If we're missing something.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what that's referring to. I'll have to go back and look at it.
So Tony, you were saying that 2 is the purposes.
Yeah, that's what the clean copy shows 2 is the purposes. Let me see the red line copy. Hold on a second. That's saying different. The red line copy has, 2 is the purposes as well, and those paragraph purposes are not numbered.
Right.
So I'm trying
The
to
only thing I could say, Tony, another task for you is to
figure that out.
Cross-reference this with the state model CR and see if that sheds some light. So we'll leave that in 14 and we'll see if that sheds some light on things. Because again, under best management practices, it's saying the exercise of any right reserved by grantor or under this paragraph 2B, I think that's supposed to be the reserved rights. Which
So
is,
they probably mean 3B.
yeah, I think that is maybe what's happening here. 3B is permitted acts and uses.
3B is, yes, permitted acts and uses.
So if we go down to 14, best management practices, the exercise of any right reserved under this 3B, I bet that is what it is. I'm feeling very confident on that. Yes. And Laura said this should say 3B. See, I'm so smart. I fixed that one. And then parking, parking, we have, by the way, how late are you guys meeting? Do you want to like not keep going through this?
Well,
it's
I wonder how many people are falling asleep.
9:20.
Is do you,
We don't have much more. Oh, no, we do have quite a bit more to go through, don't we?
this or like what other meeting? Don't you have other meeting agenda items?
Is Mary still there?
Yes, I am. We do have other meeting agenda items. Nothing terribly long. It depends on how much people want to put into the solar bylaw and discussion of the MVP program. I think everything else is pretty minor.
Because this is kind of getting close to my bedtime personally. I like to do this.
Well,
I'm
Okay.
happy to push this. This doesn't have to happen at a scheduled Conservation Commission meeting, does it? I mean, eventually we'll want to vote on this, but we're not ready for that.
Mm.
Perhaps we could meet separately on another Zoom meeting, those of us who want to weigh in on this.
Mhm.
Could we go just a bit further? Because I actually think there might not
Almost
be
done.
a whole lot after this, but
Well,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I wanted to make sure I checked in with you guys. The parking, Dan did have some specific comment that he said, I've suggested we delete this because to me it reads as though we're saying they can have 2 parking areas in each, meaning 4 total. Number 15 says parking, the installation, maintenance, and use of parking areas within each of. Oh, I see. Yeah, I see what he's saying. It's duplicating the 2, so it makes it sound like there's 4 parking areas. And we really only want it to be 2 parking areas. So just 2 parking envelopes. Do people see that?
Yep.
Tony, does that make sense to you?
I think it does, yes.
And then parking envelope 1 shall be limited to a maximum of 3 parking spaces and a gate may be installed in parking envelope 2 shall be limited to a maximum of 3 parking spaces.
or 8. I think there's a there's a, it says 3 parentheses 8.
Yeah, that's what I was
So-
trying.
So it should be 8 parentheses 8 or.
And
I don't think I
wasn't-
made this edit, but I think 3 might be kind of small for that Mechanic
Okay.
Street location,
Well,
especially if
Oh,
you
that-
want
I-
you want to
that-
have it.
The clean copy says 8.
Yeah, the clean copy makes a distinction between Mechanic Street and Fowler Street.
And Mechanic Street is 8.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it says 8 on the clean
Okay.
copy for some reason.
I don't know why it's, all right, okay. There's no agriculture. There's no farm conservation plan, there's no agriculture. Boy, that makes that easy. No green energy. None of that other stuff. Right, so and then it just goes into our normal things here. Okay. So I think we can almost wrap this up.
I do have a question about the let's see, it's enforcement. Oh, let's see, the notice and cure. Does that mean that the grantor is responsible for policing and enforcing violations by
What-
outside entities?
What page are you on?
I'm under inspection and enforcement, item 2, under legal and injunctive relief.
What page is that?
That's
Well,
page
I'm
10
on the clean copy, it's page 11.
Oh, I have 10, okay. But
10, 11, it's sort of straddles.
Inspection and enforcement here.
it's right there, stop right there.
Okay.
Number, paragraph 2, is that what, I think that's what's
Yeah,
referenced.
that's what I was, notice and cure. So I was wondering what our responsibility would be for policing and enforcing.
So it looks like we would notify you of the writing, of the violation in writing of the violation. And then you would have 30 days from receipt of the written notice to halt the violation.
Well, that would be if we were the violators. Like,
No.
what if the public is doing stuff?
No, that's, yeah, I see what you're saying. We would notify you of the the violation. And regardless of whether it was you or somebody else, you're responsible for dealing
Okay.
with it.
Well, I'm just concerned about who would be responsible for enforcement if it's not, if it's something that we're doing as the grantor, we can remedy that. Don't know quite how to approach, something illegal that might be going on by outside entities. Yeah, I'm not comfortable policing and enforcing other people's bad deeds.
Well, but that's what you need to do sometimes on property that you own.
So so the town is responsible for doing that.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Now, typically, I know with SVT, we try to be helpful.
And that language is in the model CR.
Okay. Well, I'm not gonna go chasing the guy with the chainsaw, okay?
Yeah, we know it won't be you, Marcella. I know Mike's gonna be right out there.
They'll send me in to do that. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
No, Mike's gonna send his dogs in.
Oh,
Give
give
I'll
Cooper a
send mine.
job. Yeah, we'll do that.
Chester, why didn't I think of this before?
That's right. Chester's perfect for it.
Marcella can monitor the forages.
Yeah, exactly. Mushroom pickers are more my speed.
Right. Are we ready to wrap this up? I would like to talk about what do we do from here. Can I do that? So
Yep.
Tony has a couple of assignments. One is the posting to Mass Land about e-bikes and motor vehicle use, etc. The other was, oh no, we figured out the other one.
Figure that one out already.
Huh?
You figured that one out already.
Yeah, so you don't have to do anything. Mike's gonna send me the name of the NITMUC contact, and I'm going to, I think what I'll do is I'll compare Mike's name with the names I have, and maybe I'll just do an initial outreach to say, you know, we're working on this property in Upton. We're very interested in understanding if the NITMUC peoples are interested in using the property and exploring that before we put a conservation restriction on the land. Is that correct?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, and I would try to involve you in that dialogue, in that conversation, of course, as it is your property. Okay, and then we're gonna, Tony and I will send back yet another version of this back to you after we've looked at those two items. However, understanding that if we decide to pursue the cultural, what is it called? The cultural respect agreement or something like that. Forgive me if I'm not remember it correctly. Then we may be saying, you know, this is going to take some time. Which I think is a good reason. Usually I don't like to delay things, but I would say that's a pretty good reason.
Laura,
Yeah.
I have one question, just relates to timing a little bit. Baseline report, you guys. I mean, if you know, we should have the baseline report done before the CR is recorded. I think that's what you like to do, right?
We have to do that.
Yeah, for your Land Trust Alliance standards. So there's a fall window to do the baseline report, and then there's maybe a spring window if you don't want to do it with snow on the ground, which shouldn't be done. And so just think about that, you know, and so we can, you know.
Well, we're already, our time frame right now is such that there's no way in HELL that the EEA office is going to review the CR by the springtime or before the springtime, let's say. But because we're also, I mean, if you think about, even if we didn't do the cultural agreement, just our little interactions of getting a CR to the state will take us another month at least. I mean, you know, unless you know, really, if we want to really crank it out, which, you know, I like to do, but it will take them at least 3 months to review it at best.
So thinking like a baseline report in the spring window, which would be great.
What's that?
So kind of leaning towards a baseline report, field work done in the spring.
Probably. Are you now, usually we've done our baseline documentation usually, but with you and Upton, you've often done it. Is that right?
Yeah, we've done some of our own. Metacomet's done some of our own. I probably can't commit to doing this one. Actually, not probably. I can't commit to doing this,
which is fine. Yeah.
So,
but yeah, thank you for bringing up that issue. But I think that yeah, and I'm gonna look at some of the perhaps logistical issues for us to leave this project open for so long and not close it off our books. So I'm gonna do some internal investigations about that as well. And I'll let you know if I have some red flags. Anything else?
There's one itty bitty thing, way up on page 4. Structures and improvements. It mentions all kinds of stuff, but what about windmills? Are those considered towers?
Are you fetching at windmills? What's
Built-in-
that saying?
Built-in windmills.
Structures and improvements. Constructing, placing, or allowing to remain any temporary or permanent structure. Blah, blah, blah.
Oh, wait, prohibited?
Yeah, it's
It-
3A. It's prohibited acts and uses 3A1.
Okay.
And it does, it does reference solar panel. So it's a good point. Maybe it should say the windmills.
That, although I would argue that that list is not meant to be exhaustive. If I was the lawyer arguing the case.
Sure, that's fair enough, but there is an awful lot of specificity here, but it's fair. And it does say including without limitation. You're right. And so it's just meant to be illustrative of structures, to be sure.
Okay, well, and it,
I would vote for adding windmills. I mean, it is kind of it's on a hill. So,
And they're starting to become more common now
Yeah.
to the point where, it may
you
make
never know.
It's
I mean,
just so
probably
funny because
more likely to be windmill proposed than a swimming pool,
yeah,
so.
when you say windmill, I just think of Don Quixote. I don't really think of those big wind turbines. I think that's what you really need to say is a wind turbine.
okay, yeah, whatever the proper term for it is, but that makes sense. Wind turbine.
Turbine. Okay.
Yeah, actually,
I'm-
a windmill might suggest that somebody's, milling flour up there and doing something very quaint, which that's not what's
Oops.
happening.
Happening. All right.
Well, thank you for
Well, this is great. I'm
Oh,
glad
yeah.
Tony had a chance to be involved in this conversation.
Thank you for
And
having me. It was great to meet everyone.
Nice to meet you too. Good job,
Hopefully-
everyone.
hopefully we'll meet you in person sometime. I mean, I've met some of you in person, but All right. Good night, everyone.
Thanks,
Have a
Laura.
good night.
Hey,
Good night.
thank you
Tony.
both very
Thank
much.
you.
Take care, guys.
Good night. Okay, Mary, what are we up to now?
I think we're missing a few things. We need to do 84 Grove Street, removal of a parcel from 61A. And I can pull that up, I believe. Oh, here we go. So here's Grove Street. This is the new Summer Circle subdivision, and they want to pull this lot off of this bigger lot and pull it out of 61A. And if you guys remember, I think this is a little goat farm here.
Oh, great.
Lots of goats there. And I amended this must be for a housing lot. So it's just a recommendation of whether the town would want to exercise its right of first refusal on this lot.
That like half an acre?
It says it's 25. 030. Let's see if it says in the letter the size. Well, the total thing is 12.87 acres. I assume this would be the minimum lot size, which is a little under 2 acres, or maybe it's different and that must have a different zoning there. It looks like it's similar to the lots on Summer Circle.
If that's 23,000 square feet, that's about half an acre.
Okay.
Right. You can tell by the dimensions. Multiply it out.
Yeah, so a half-acre lot to be pulled out for development, I'm sure.
What did the letter say?
Letter says, Dear Conservation Commission, this letter is to inform you of my intent to remove from Chapter 61A a parcel of land from my 12.87 acres located at 84 Grove Street. The land has been in Chapter 61A for over 30 years. The purpose for removal is to sell for the construction of a single family home, not for myself or my family, due to financial necessity. I would very much appreciate it if you could expedite its release.
Anyone have any discussion, questions, or comments?
I don't have any opposition to it.
Does someone have a motion to release this from the 61A?
So
So
moved.
moved. Second,
Okay, let's move with vote. Chris, I.
Alan, I.
I.
Sandy, I.
Mike, aye.
Marcella, I.
And the only two other things on our discussion items that we might want to mention are the proposed solar bylaw revisions. We had actually, this got discussed at land stewardship, and so from the comments there, I wrote an email to Mike about some of those comments, but the Concom has never fully discussed it. Although, Grace, did they end up tabling it last night? This is before town meeting. I think Joe Layden is thinking that we're not really ready and he really wants to pull it back and do some more review. Is that what they did?
Well, last night it was held in the main hall, and we also held it remotely because we were expecting a big turnout, but it wasn't big turnout. The folks online couldn't hear Mike's presentation, the town planner, so we are continuing it to next meeting.
So, but is it going to be on the fall town meeting or spring town meeting? Do you know that?
The board hasn't voted yet.
I attended that hearing, and as Grace said, they continued it for a couple of weeks. So that actually gives us an opportunity to actually submit a comment letter to the planning board if we want to do that. Just briefly, it seems even though the change in the bylaw would affect 75% of the town, everything that's agricultural residential zoned, when you look at all the constraints, especially the where there is three-phase power, and that's needed for a solar farm, there's really very few locations in town which are, let's say, vulnerable to solar farms. There are some, and I think I wish I don't have this map ready to queue up. I think I could find it, but I don't know how much people want to talk about this at 9:30. But I think possibly the most at-risk property could be some of our agricultural land that's still preserved. And one thing they do say in their proposed bylaw is that the land has to be, basically free of trees for 5 years. So what does that do? It leaves agricultural land vulnerable. So that might be one comment we could have. Another comment is there are some regulations that go along with kind of go along with this. They're existing regulations for solar farms, basically. And I took a look at those, and there's a lot of things that could be added that would, maybe provide some more environmental protection. There's one section that, basically asks what information the applicant's supposed to provide, and I would suggest adding things like biomap habitat, prime soils, vernal pools. There's a lot of like resources that probably should be considered that just aren't mentioned. I do have a markup that I could send to everybody of that. And what the planning board said is, if Grace, I think, correct me if I don't get this right, but I think they said they would come back later and consider, revising the regulations, and that wouldn't need to be done at a town meeting. Is that correct? Did I catch that right, Grace? Okay.
But they haven't made a final vote. And I think the idea was, since some of the members who attended remotely couldn't hear the town planner's presentation, the next meeting they'll vote to whether it'll go to town meeting. But right now it's looking like it will probably be pushed.
Okay, well, I guess the question is, do we want to provide anything to the planning board for their next meeting or not? And if we did, I would suggest that just maybe mention the concern that, as written, it appears to leave agricultural land especially vulnerable. Does protect forests, but and also that we would recommend that if the bylaws change, regulations have changed as well, eventually to be more protective of natural resources. Something like that. Could be like very simple letter, or email.
I'd be in support of that.
Does anyone else have comments? That sounds like a great idea, Mike. Send a letter around, or
well,
when's the next planning board meeting?
well, 2 weeks from yesterday.
Oh, so it's before our next meeting.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's before our next meeting.
The 24th.
So I don't know how to do this, authorize Mary to submit a letter based on what we've discussed here, or send an email. Is that okay with you, Mary?
Yeah, that's fine. And I did send an email to the planning board without your approval, just with a few comments that we had from the land stewardship meeting, which includes some of this, but not the stuff on the regs.
Yeah, I can, I can send everybody the markup on the regs, and then Mary can consider whatever you want to consider in that.
Yeah, and the other comment I thought maybe we could add something where the town should give preference to lands that are previously disturbed. Not that there's a lot of it, but if there was a sand pit or something like that, that should be, if there were other lands that would, if that would be one that would be easier to approve than cutting down trees or ag land.
That's a good idea. Should we take a vote? A motion and then vote on the letter or comment? Okay, can we have a motion to have Mary issue a comment letter after Mike has his comment that he sent to the planning board?
Well, how about with friendly amendment. Authorize Mary to prepare a letter to the planning board with comments as discussed during this meeting, to summarize comments as discussed during this meeting.
Excellent. That's very friendly at almost 10 o'clock at night. So do a second to Mike's comment.
So that's a motion.
Do a second to Mike's motion.
Second,
Okay, let's do a voice vote. Chris, aye.
I.
Sandy, I.
Mike, aye.
Marcella, I.
Might note that Mike is now very sad. The Minnesota Twins just lost tonight, so they're out of the playoffs.
Oh, is David still here?
What?
I think he's gone.
Oh, okay. So this is unanimous vote.
Oh
and
no,
then
he's still here. Or at least he's still listed. David, are
Is-
you there?
Can you hear
this
me?
is-
Oh, there
Yes.
you are.
Oh, there I am. Oh, sorry. No, I think I was muted, Chris. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
I was
Did
an
you
I.
have last motion?
Yes, that was I.
Okay.
Thank you.
Unanimous vote. Members present. We were sure you were still here. So anything else?
I did put together a draft order of conditions for 93 Crockett. If you guys wanna, I don't know whether you got a chance to look at it. I think the only things that were different on there was a requirement for a chapter 91 permit to be applied. Now the chapter 91 process is a 6-month process, so that, you know, they at least need to apply for them early on in the building process, and theoretically they should have time to have it received before their certificate of compliance is received. That, and I recommended that if people remember, there's some undisturbed shoreline there that has bounds protecting it, that it be noted on the as-built plan that, and it's going to be in the order that undisturbed shoreline is to remain undisturbed in perpetuity or whatever. Those were the main conditions that were different from our regular ones.
Does anyone have any comments or questions? Okay, let's take a motion to accept Mary's notice order of conditions.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Okay, let's do a voice vote. Chris, aye.
I.
Sandy,
Alan,
I.
David, I.
Mike, aye.
Marcella, I.
Did Alan chat?
Yep, I said Alan, I.
Thank you. Okay, let's unanimous vote of the commission. Mary and Grace, anything else?
Yeah, just that I think we don't need to do anything else. The MVP program, I think we can talk about that next meeting.
Okay.
So,
Anything else, Grace?
Oh,
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for being so patient for a late night meeting. We were all, I think, looking at the agenda saying 7:30, and it certainly wasn't that short. So thank you, everyone, and we have a motion to adjourn, Sandy.
So moved.
Okay, well, all in favor?
Aye.
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 I.
Okay.
Aye.
Good night, everybody.